I'm here today with Raymond Andrews, a former resident of the Portagrave Peninsula. And Raymond grew up on Taylor's Hill in Ship Cove. And his heart and soul is still on the peninsula. Raymond, can you tell us what it was like growing up down on Taylor's Hill?
Taylor's Hill in the 40s and 50s. I'm amazed that I'm talking about it in that context first. But anyway, I guess it revolved around, in my humble opinion, maybe four things that I focus on every time I'm thinking about it. And that is your family, obviously. We didn't know a lot about our families in those days, believe it or not.
No.
The ancestry was not a big topic. And then the second thing that always intrigued me was school. Even though sometimes you didn't like school and the homework.
That's right, yeah.
I suppose you couldn't escape church, because growing up in Portagrave in the 40s and 50s, I mean, that was a regimented activity for all of us pretty well, no matter what denomination you were.
Exactly.
And going to church.
Yes.
And if there was a fourth one, as I like to recall, it had to be the interest there was in sports. And to me, throwing them all together and saying we had a wonderful life, even though things were a bit difficult at times for all of us, I would say the memories are great, and I can go on and on about either one we care to choose. So maybe...
Okay, well, first of all, I'm going to ask you about Taylor's Hill. Now, I don't remember much about Taylor's Hill,
No.
but I've heard about association room or a schoolhouse, and I know that the driveway going up to your family home is called Schoolhouse Hill. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, well, I got to get in a plug for my good younger buddy, Gerald Andrews.
Right.
And say that if you haven't, as a Portagraveman, read the detail that somebody like Gerald has put together in the history of Portagrave, I think you should be, you're negligent and you should get on and do it. I told my sister that last night.
There you go.
But anyway, Portagrave was in many respects a center of education, even back in the early 1800s. And I'll just use one thing that always grabbed me from Gerald's book about how important Taylor's Hill was. And that is, on Taylor's Hill in the 1830s, 40s, there was a schoolhouse, 2-room. But the fascinating part was there was 150 students in the school on Taylor's Hill.
Very good.
And secondly, the part that grabs me again is that there was about 85 students on Sunday going to Sunday school on Taylor's Hill. And the third one, which I suppose today you'd even say back then you were doing, there was adult education. And another 50 people plus went to regular adult education at this schoolhouse on Taylor's Hill. That's the real history of the older part.
That is, yes.
Now, when I was growing up, I was part of the transition between the old St. Luke's School down Ship Cove and the new one.
Right.
And of course, believe it or not, I got to go to school in grade 8, 50 feet away from my back door.
Oh, there you go.
There you are, because the ACWA had a room, their meeting room, was right there on Taylor's Hill, probably a spin-off from the school days. And their association was a beautiful building, fairly big, and Essie Andrews taught grade 8 in that school.
Did she?
Which was next door to my house. So Essie could pop over and get a cup of tea, or I could pop over to the school, all within the space of a minute.
Oh, very good.
So that was grade 8 in about 1955. And so, of course, the rest is history. We all then moved down to the school that presently exists as a hall. But anyway, that's where I went to school in grade 8, was right on Taylor's Hill, Schoolhouse Hill. And like I said, if you haven't read it, folks, when you're listening to me, please dig out Gerald Andrews' book and look at the importance that Taylor's Hill and school and education had in Portagrave.
Yeah, that's wicked. I didn't even know about the association room.
Well, there you are. Oh, and I forgot to say, of course, when the association decided that they had a better facility down at the school now, because that was the hall then for a lot of the Anglican activities, that they decided to sell their association room. And Dad, in his wisdom, decided, well, that's going to be a great store for us.
Oh, very good.
And so Dad bought the old association room, and then, of course, we used it all while I was there and long after I left Portagrave.
Right on. And there was a number of houses there too, wasn't it?
Oh, Taylor's Hill, man, I hate to admit that I'm an Andrews talking about Taylor's Hill, but that's where we live because my dad bought one of the Taylor houses. Sam Taylor became a pastor, and he actually, when he left, Dad bought his house. So we actually lived in a Taylor house.
Oh, very good.
Right? But what I remember, and there's a lot of things to remember, but there's one thing and one part of the Taylor's Hill family that I remember. There was lots of stables and store lofts, like 3 or 4 big stables, 2 stories, stored the hay, 4 or 5 root cellars.
Oh, yeah.
1, 2, 5 houses there on Taylor's Hill.
Very good.
And only 2 of them were Taylors. That's where Eric Howard Taylor lived.
Right.
And of course, the one that I remember, and I got to spend a few sentences on that one, was Uncle Eli and Aunt Susie Taylor. They've been photographed and they're in various magazines and stuff now. And I said to myself, if there's ever a picture of Taylor's Hill that will be embedded in your mind forever, it's Aunt Susie.
Yeah.
Because that picture showed Aunt Susie the way I saw her every day. Aunt Susie didn't go out of doors without a white apron on.
No, for
and
sure.
I mean white.
Yeah.
I don't mean a little off color.
No.
White. And the reason she did it, and I used to always marvel at her, she'd go around with her white apron kind of tucked up, picking up chips for kindling.
Right.
For the fire. Now, there's a second part about Taylor's Hill. That was a big double house they lived in.
Was that on the side, like right on the side of the road or up?
No, that was up on the back.
Up
Down
on the
the
back.
front end, right by the lane going up to our hill now, was where, again, a Taylor house, but it was then a Hussey house.
Okay.
Because George Hussey had married Lily Taylor and her sister Ada. You probably remember Ada, maybe. But anyway, Lily and Ada were 2 sisters. And they occupied the house right on the road, which was next door to the biggest barking hole in the community. A place where people came to do their barking of their nets.
Oh, okay.
That was the Taylor house out front, but then a Hussey. The big one that Uncle Eli and Aunt Susie had was right back even about where Jimmy Andrews is now, back in the side of the hill.
All right.
The part that I remember too, there's 2 parts now. Uncle Eli, strangely, if we were good boys, we could go visit, and we would be invited into the kitchen, and we could sit back and enjoy a little chat.
Yeah.
This older gentleman, he was revered, you couldn't say much.
No.
But one of the things that I said to my sister Frances last night, I'll never forget, Aunt Susie's white apron and her picking up chips.
Right.
But Uncle Eli had a little gift for you if he kind of liked you and the conversation went well. He always brought, and I never did figure out where he got them, he had loads of hazelnuts.
Hazelnuts.
Hazelnuts in Portagrave in the 50s.
Wow.
Now I think that it connected to some of the friends who visited from St. John's or other places and brought them to him. I'll conclude on one thing about Uncle Eli and Aunt Susie's house. This one a lot of people might not know, but now everybody around it is gone, so I'll tell you.
Okay.
Uncle Eli, when he was buried, had some good friends from St. John's, without naming them. They admired the old house because if you were never in Uncle Eli Taylor's house, you missed a wonderful experience. But those people had what we would call today antique dining room or living rooms in the city.
Right.
And this one is a bit of a shocker. While Uncle Eli was being buried, a couple of those guys left church early. And they went up to Uncle Eli's and they took his main door, boxing, facings and all, heading into the other room and took it and loaded it in their car and went on to St. John's. End of story.
Oh, wow.
During the funeral.
During.
Or we'll say right at the end of the funeral. So that's a little bit about Taylor, because there's lots more, but that's a good start for you.
There you go. Perfect. Well, we're going to conclude this part on Taylor's Hill. And Raymond, thank you very much. This has been very interesting.
Thanks.
And we're going to come back again.